We are in class 35 tonight, believe it or not, since we started this series. Gearing up for our big Jeopardy night in May again. Yeah, we got plenty of time to study. It's not till May. We're good. We got all this stuff. That's right. Up your arms. And they're doing little quizzes every week now. So I don't know if you guys want to go to little quizzes every week, but they're doing little quizzes every week. They're starting to take this serious. We got to get nervous. But the what? There you go. Start listening in. We can. But tonight we're going to start the book of Ruth. We have finished the book of Judges. We're moving on to Ruth. And next week we will go into Samuel. So we are cranking right along. We're going to be, by the time we hit Christmas break, the break for the holidays, we should be in the life of David. So we're going to kind of jump through these things a little bit quick, but that's okay. So tonight we're going to be in the book of Ruth, and as it says in the very first verse of this book, it tells us when it takes place. And so it says in verse 1, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So we don't have to think about when this is taking place. The book tells us. It's during the time of the judges. So we know it's in that 400-year period. Probably very similar to the time of Gideon. Somewhere in that area where you had the Midianites and stuff coming up and attacking when they would have famines and droughts and stuff. Well, Israel gets hit with a famine. And so the people there are suffering from it. We know it's in the time of the judges. And it said, so a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. And Moab is just across the other side of the Dead Sea area, and it's in what is present-day Jordan. And they went over there. It's kind of a higher plateau, probably got a little bit more rain maybe than what they had in Judah. So they packed up and went over there looking for something, just trying to beat this famine that had come in, this drought. It says the man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah. Now, Ephrathites is the area that Bethlehem was in. So that's what it is. It's not a different tribe. They're from the tribe of Judah. But Ephratah, which the connection back to this is your bunny trail for right now. The connection back to this is when it talks about the story of Jesus being born, and it says that Isaiah says that he will be born in Judah, Ephratah, in Bethlehem, Ephratah. That's what they're talking about, is that Ephrathites. And so we know that Bethlehem that's spoken of in the prophecies of Jesus is the same that is Bethlehem in Judah. And that's where this story is really coming out of, is Elimelech and Naomi were part of the tribe of Judah. They lived in the area of Bethlehem. They had land in the area of Bethlehem because during the time of the judges, the people are still living in the tribal allotments that were given to them by Joshua. So they had family land that was theirs. It was their inheritance. It would be handed down from generation to generation, and it never would leave their family line. That was the whole thing with the tribal allotments, so to speak, is you never really got rid of that land as long as you had family members that were there. It was handed down generation to generation. If you got in trouble, you could take that land and sell it, but you had to sell it to someone on the condition that in the year of Jubilee, which was every 50 years, in the year of Jubilee, the ownership would revert back to the family that it was given to. So you never really bought the land. What you bought was the crop for the number of years left until you hit the year of Jubilee. So when you were buying something like that, so to speak, you were basically renting it. And you were renting it, and if it was 40 years in, and you only had 10 years, then you would give them the price according to 10 years of harvest. If it was 10 years in, you'd give them a price according to 40 years of harvest that you could collect on it. But ultimately, the ownership didn't change. If you came to the end of your family line, then it would revert to another part of your family. It could be redeemed by them, so it stayed in your tribal allotment and never left. So it would always be a part of your family and part of your tribe. So anyway, they went into Moab, but still had their land there in Bethlehem. It says, now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah, the other named Ruth. Now, aren't you glad that Ruth was the faithful one? It's so much easier to say and so much easier to read than Orpah. What a weird Old Testament book that would have made, the book of Orpah. So we're glad it was Ruth that was faithful. So anyway, so she had these 2 sons. They married 2 Moabite women. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had came to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. When Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back each of you to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. So Naomi says to these young ladies, because they're still pretty young at this point, she says, I'm going back to my homeland. I'm going back to my family, to my kin. I'm going back to the family inheritance, basically. I'm just going to die there. But you guys just go back home. You're still young enough, you can remarry, so go ahead and just do that. Now, she is trying to think of the well-being of her daughters-in-law. There's really nothing for you back where I'm going. I'm going back to a desolate piece of land that hasn't been worked in a while, or maybe that they had leased out to somebody else for those terms, and so she was just going to go back and basically live on the welfare of her family. And so she said, why don't you go back to your family's homes, settle in there, find another husband, continue on with your life, and we'll just call it good. So, see you later, bye. And it says, then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud, and said to her, we will go back with you to your people. But Naomi said, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Now, what they're referring to here is a law that they had, and it was that right of succession, basically, where if you had a young son or whatever, you had a son that married a wife and he died, then his brother would marry the widow to continue a family in his name. So that way the family name could be carried on. So because she was the heir of the older son, then the next son down would marry her, and then she would have children, and they would receive the full inheritance. If something was to happen to that son, then the next son in line would marry that daughter and daughter-in-law and try to have children with her, so the family line could be carried on from the eldest boy. So it was the responsibility of the next generation. So that's what Naomi's referring to here. She says, why would you guys go back to Judah with me? Stay here in Moab where you're from. Why would you go back to Judah? They said, no, we're going to go with you. And she says, at best case scenario, you're looking at ladies who are probably in their 20s or about 20. They probably got married quite a bit younger, but maybe close to 20 years old, something like that, late teens. And she said, even if I went back and had kids right now, are you going to wait for them to grow up and marry them? I mean, you're going to be 15, 20 years older than they are. So by the time they're old enough to marry, you're going to be, kind of a middle-aged lady there. So why would you do that? And so she's discouraging them from coming back because she said, there's nothing I have in my inheritance that is worth you following me back for. You are better off to stay with your families and build an inheritance with them and build an inheritance with someone else. So it says, return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, she says, don't come back for my sake because our family line ends here. This is it. It says, it is better for me than, are bitter for me, more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. So Naomi's saying, you know, we've all lost our husbands. We've all lost everything basically here, but it's worse for me because I'm an old lady. At least you guys have a chance to start your life over again. You're still young enough. It's more bitter for me than for you. But still, let me go back to my home. And it says, at this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Probably one of the most well-known verses out of the book of Ruth. It's one that's quoted many times, and many people are familiar with. But that's the famous saying out of it is she says, no, I stay with you. I'm going where you're going. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you go, I'm going to go. Where you stay, I'm going to stay. That's the end. I'm staying with you. End of discussion. It says, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. And Mara means bitter. Call me bitter. Call me a bitter old lady. That's my name now. And so she says, my life is so out of whack right now. Just call me bitterness. That's who I am. And it says, I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Meaning, when I left here, I had everything. I had a husband, I had sons, went and got daughters-in-law, went and got a good life. We had a farm here, we had all this stuff. And now I come back, and I'm just the widow of Elimelech, and I really have no stake to any of this, really, to speak of. And I have no sons. And so I went away full, I come back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth. The barley harvest was beginning. So they're just starting to do the barley harvest. This is going to be around the time of spring. Okay, so March, April, somewhere. April, maybe close to May. And they're just getting ready to do the barley harvest. And again, they arrive back there, but they really don't have anything to speak of. And so they don't come back to a large estate. They come back to a land they're familiar with and people who know them, but still not a lot of earthly possession. So as we go into 2, it says, now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. Naomi said to her, go ahead, my daughter. So she went out and entered a field and began to glean behind the harvesters. You go back into the law, and the law of the Israelites, the law that God gave to them, is when they are harvesting their fields, they are not to harvest the edges and the corners. Leave those alone. The harvesters would take the main part of the field, main part of the crop, and they would harvest it out. But along the edges and in the corners of the field, leave those alone. And those were for people who were in need. That was their welfare program. If you were hungry, if you were basically kind of the welfare case, then you would go out into the field and you knew you had access to so much grain in every field. And so you could go out and collect enough to keep your family sustained. It wasn't going to be enough for you to gather and put out and start selling, but you would stay sustained and you would have enough to feed your families on if you were willing to go out and work the fields yourself. So it says, as it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. So she went out, Ruth went out, and she's doing what The other people who didn't have a farm of their own that were poor would go out, and Ruth started working the edge of the field, gathering enough grain so that her and Naomi would have food to eat. Plain and simple. And it just so happens, coincidence, right? It just so happens that the field that she chose to work in is a field that belonged to Boaz, who was from the family of Elimelech, who was Naomi's dead husband. So she's gathering barley from a field that is part of the family of Elimelech. So, kind of home. It says, just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you. The Lord bless you," they answered. Boaz asked the overseers of the harvesters, "Whose does that young woman belong to? Is she one of our harvesters? Is she one of the neighbors' Who is this lady? Who's this young girl out here?" The overseers replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So she proved herself by working exceptionally hard. She was going to make it work for her and Naomi, and so she was really putting in extra effort. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." So he says, you're not working for me, but you're welcome to take all you want out of this field and help yourself to the water. Stay close to my guys. Just come right behind the women that I have working for me. Just stay close. That way nobody will mess with you. Nobody will bother you. You'll be fine. Just come along and stay close. So at this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" And Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." So he says, "I'm impressed with you. I know the story. You're a woman of character. You have gone above and beyond the call of duty, basically. You stayed with your mother-in-law. You're back here to take care of her. You're back here to watch over and protect her, to make sure she has enough food and everything. And I'm really impressed with what you're doing." And so his prayer then is, let the Lord bless you for all your effort and all the things you've done. You have sacrificed for her. Now let the Lord bless you and what you've done. And then it says, "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord," she said. "You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here. Have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar." When she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men, "Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her." So he's saying, you know what? She doesn't even have to take from the very edges. Let her get some of the good stuff. I know what she's doing. Let her gather from among the main sheaves. Let her get some good grain. It says, even pull out some stalks for her and, from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her. So he's saying, when you're getting the real good stuff, take a few of those stalks and just kind of throw them aside. When you see her coming, just give her the good stuff. So he is taking from his harvest. This is his field. He's the owner. And he's saying, you know what? Give her some of the choice stuff. Boaz has decided in his heart to repay her for the kindness that she has showed to Naomi and for the way that she is taking care of her. And so he says, you know what? Let her have some of the good stuff, because I know what she's doing with it. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to about an ephah. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work?" "Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead," she added. "That man is our close relative." Now, this starts to become important. We're going to see and hear a term, and I was talking to Jerry about this earlier. We're going to come across a term here in the next couple chapters. It's going to talk about a guardian redeemer. And guardian redeemer has some good, I guess, overtones with it, and I know that's why they changed it to it. But in King James or in some of the other versions of even the NIV, it says kinsman redeemer. And that's probably a better description of it in my book because I've grown up with that. I'm used to that. That's what I've heard it called. But it's that close relative is what we're looking for here. So just like where if a man dies and has not had children, his younger brother is responsible to marry his widow to have children in his name. This close relative ties back to that year of Jubilee and the succession of land and how it goes down. This is all in the law of Israel. And it's to keep the family line alive. And so Naomi looks at Ruth and says, "You were at Boaz." Well, Boaz, he's one of her close relatives. This is good. You're gleaning in family farm here, This is the good thing. It says, "He is our guardian redeemer," or one of our guardian redeemers. And again, kinsman redeemer is the traditional use that's there. And the kinsman redeemer is the one who, if a family was not able to continue with the land. So in a case like this, Elimelech has 2 sons. The possession of that land would pass from him to his first son. Anything happened to him would go to his second son. Well, all 3 of them are dead. So here's Naomi with his piece of land and just a daughter-in-law. Who inherits that land? You see, it's supposed to stay with the family, but Naomi's saying, "I'm at the end of my life," and she's a Moabite. What happens now? Well, what happens is the close relative, the kinsman redeemer, could redeem that land and keep it in the family so that it doesn't revert back to someone else at the time of Jubilee, but it would stay in that immediate close family so that it would stay in the tribe of Judah and be able to be worked, and it would just be handed down through that way. So it says, "Then Ruth the Moabite said, 'He even said to me, stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain.' Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, 'It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field you might be harmed.'" There was the other thing. This is still human nature. A young lady alone coming in from Moab, just walking into a field and gleaning with the other people who maybe are poor, whatever, there was always the chance that harm would come to that young lady. There are people with nefarious things on their mind. How's that for a word? That, just was not good. And so she said, "I'm glad that you found a close relative to work with, but also he is watching over you, so no harm will come to you. Because remember, you're alone." When she's walking to the fields in the morning or going back home at night, she's alone, and she's a young lady. And she said, "Hey, it's not safe. This is still the time of the judges out here. This is still the Wild West, so to speak. So be careful. This is very good. Stay with his workers. Stay with the people that are there with him." It says, "So Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvests were finished. And she lived with her mother-in-law. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, 'My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor.'" Now, chances are he would be actually winnowing barley out there, which you would go to this threshing floor. They would take the barley. It would be mixed in with all the chaff and everything that they had pulled off the stalks and stuff. And what they would do is, we've talked about winnowing floors before when we talked about Gideon and stuff. They would take like big threshing forks, like pitchforks, and they would throw the grain with the chaff in the air. The wind would blow across. As the breeze blew, the chaff would blow away. The grain would fall back down because it's heavier. It's a very simple process to separate, but it's a very labor-consuming process. I mean, there's a lot of work in throwing that grain up and down when you're talking a whole field full of grain. But it was very common for the field owner to be there during that time. Why? Because I've got all these people that I'm hiring to work for me, but how do I know that they're going to give me an honest day's wage, and how do I know I'm going to get all the barley that they took out of my field? Well, I'm going to be standing there watching them, and I'm going to watch them throw that grain in the air, and I'm going to watch them take that grain and scoop it up and put it in the sacks, because I want to know that they're not going to come back and go, that was a big field, but you only got 10 bags of grain out of it. It's like, no, I should have 100. But, so they would stay and they would watch the process. It was very common. It's not, anything out of the ordinary. So Naomi knows, hey, the harvest is finished. They're going to start winnowing the stuff out. So Boaz will be there. He'll be at the threshing floor. He'll be watching these guys, and he'll be helping with it to make sure he's getting an honest count of his grain. And it says, so she says, which is great advice, from a mother-in-law to her daughter-in-law, or to a mother to a daughter, or anything else. She says, hey, how do you catch a man? Let me tell you. You can pass this on. Wash. Let's start there. Clean up a bit. Put on perfume and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor. But don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. So she says, get all gussied up, get all smelling pretty, and get all your stuff on, and then just kind of slip down to the floor. After he's worked all day, ate a big supper, had a little bit of wine to relax with there, and he's settling down for the night, that's when you're going to make yourself known. Says, when he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. And this has been ripped out of context so much because people look at this and go, what is he meaning? So they take it as some weird euphemism, uncover his feet. Oh, she went down there and she was doing some pretty bad thing. No, it's not. It's actually from a very old custom that they had. It's way out of date now, but it was an old custom at this time where it was where the woman is basically proposing to the man. This is a proposal. And what they would do is a man would be sitting there and he would have his garment around him and kind of snuggled up for the evening and literally kind of uncover his feet. She would take the corner of his garment and pull it back. And then she would sit there. And if he accepted the proposal, then he would place his garment around her, kind of like that wing of protection, which says, yes, I've accepted your proposal. It doesn't mean they do anything more at that point. This is not immoral, okay? This is not something that was going to cause sin here with it. This is when a woman wanted to make that proposal to a man. She's tired of the man waiting around. She thinks, I got to get this thing done. So she would go and she would pull back the corner of his cloak and then sit there and see. And then it's up to him. All he's got to do to say yes is just cover her up, and now you're in my household. You're under my protection. You're under my wing. You are now in my household. And that was the same as getting engaged right there. And everybody would know it, basically. The other thing is they would not be alone. This is the threshing floor. It's harvest. There would be all the workers that were staying there as well. It's not like they were, snuck off into a back alley somewhere. They're in this whole area, and there's other people around. And so Ruth went and did this, and it is above board. It is legitimate. It says, I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I am your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the cover of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer or a kinsman redeemer of our family. So this is her proposal. I am making myself available to you as the next kin. You can redeem this as the kinsman redeemer. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. And so Boaz is most likely significantly older than she is. Not terrible older. People speculate possibly that Elimelech and maybe Boaz's father might have been brothers, because it's in that line or something. And so Boaz might have been like a nephew to Elimelech. So a little older than his sons maybe, but not a lot older. And so here he says, you didn't go after the younger guys. They're probably a little more your age. I'm a little older than you are. But yet he knew that what she was doing was not only for her, but it was for Naomi. Because Ruth in and of herself did not have the land. It's Naomi's land still. And yet she says, you are our kinsman. Naomi has given up her right to the land, in a sense. You don't have to marry Naomi to get the land, but she's put Ruth in that place. And so Boaz realizes that she is doing this not just for herself, but also for her mother-in-law, also to keep that family line alive and to follow those traditions. So that's why he says, you didn't run after the rich young men. You didn't go off and do your own thing. Instead, you stayed and took care of Naomi, and now you're staying and taking care of your responsibility. So he says, yes, I will do exactly as you asked. It says, all the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of your family, there is another who is more closely related than I. He says, hey, thanks for the offer, but I can't do anything right now because my relative or whatever is closer in relationship to Elimelech than I am. And so actually, he's the one who has the option to be the kinsman redeemer. I'm second in line. We got to talk to him first. So it says, stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. And so again, people look at that and go, something's going on. He said, yeah, spend the night with me here. No, that's not what it is. What it is the only ladies that would be out alone after dark, before when the sun's really down and the sun's coming up, would be ladies of bad reputation. Okay? And so he's also looking after her safety. This is now his technical fiance. And so he says, stay here. Don't go back to Naomi tonight. Don't be seen walking into town alone as a lady because, number one, people are going to think bad things about you. And number two, it's just flat out dangerous. So just stay the night. When it starts to get light in the morning, go back to Naomi and tell her what's going on. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, no one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor. So he's again trying to protect her reputation. We're just not going to spread this around. He also said, bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out. When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law Naomi, asked, how did it go, my daughter? Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. So Naomi knows Boaz is going to take care of this. So we have her bringing back more grain to Naomi, taking care of them. Boaz is saying, I'm going to take care of you. You're part of my family now. We're going to do this. So it says, meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there. Now, the town gate was literally where all business transactions were taken care of. And so the men of the town would meet at the town gate in the mornings, and they would come together, and if they had business dealings to do, that's where they would do it. If they had legal matters to settle, that's where they would do it. As a matter of fact, when kings or princes would come to their area or to their town, they would go and they would sit at the city gate for judgment. And they would rule from that point. There's a couple of cities that I've been up to, archaeological remains up in the northern part, like the city of Dan and stuff, where they still have the remains of a stand that a throne would sit on. Where if the king was there or an official was there, they would sit there, and it's literally inside the city gate. You walk in the first gate, you turn a corner, you walk through a second gate, and there's the throne. They ruled there, they judged there. And the men of the town would gather there. And that's where things would be done. So Boaz knew, this is where I can get this settled. So it says, just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So we went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here." And they did so. 10 elders, they could make an official legal document with this many people in attendance in this little gathering. So he said, you 10 elders of the town, you 10 older men, come over here and sit down. I want you guys as witnesses. We're going to make a proposal here. And it says, then he said to the guardian redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belongs to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it," he said. So Boaz tells him, hey, Naomi's back. She's ready to give up her rights to that land. If you want to buy it, it's for sale. And it has to be done in our family. It has to stay in our family. So I'm giving you first dibs, your closest relative. So if you want to buy Naomi's land, go ahead and buy it. But I thought we'd go ahead and get the legal witnesses around here. And all you have to do is say, yep, I'm going to redeem it. It's my land. And Boaz said, and I'll walk away. But if you don't want it, I'm prepared to do it. Because here's the thing with the kinsman redeemer or the guardian redeemer. There were qualifications in the law of what it was. The first was you must be a close relative. So this guy is closer than Boaz, so he gets first dibs at it. The second thing is you had to be able to purchase it. So Boaz goes to him and says, I know you have plenty of money, so you can buy it, because that's one of the qualifications. You can't do it on loan. You can't do it on barter. You have to pay for the land outright. And Boaz says, I know you got the money, and so do I. So we're still in this together. The next is you have to be willing to. And he said, so this is where I'm asking you. I know that you're the closest relative. I know you have the means to do it, but are you willing to do it? And so Boaz says, if you are not, I am. And then I take full responsibility for this. Then Boaz says, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite. Oh, I forgot to mention that in the sale of this land. You get a wife. So you're a close relative. You have the means. Are you still willing? Because you also get the daughter-in-law, because she's attached to the land through Naomi. Maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You may redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. The guy goes, yeah, I want the land. Yeah, I've got the money. Oh, heck no, I don't want her as my wife. So he says, I'm out. I'm not taking that responsibility. It could jeopardize what I have. I have my own estate. I have my own children. I have my own inheritance for them. What's this going to do if I bring her? Affect my children, the inheritance. And so he said, you know what? No. I'm not going to have my children with her so that the name of her dead husband can live on. I don't want that. Too much red tape. So he refuses it. Now, took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legal transactions in Israel. So if you bought land, you only had one sandal left. But that was the way they proved, yes, I am doing this of my own free will. yes, I am doing this in the witness of other people. I'm going to take my sandal to that guy. When he receives it, then that land is mine. That is of my own free will, and he has received it. It's a visual thing, actually witness. And you know that he is saying, yes, I am entering into this. And so it says, yourself, elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon, Ruth the Moabite wife, our widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear among the family or today you are witnesses. So Boaz was brilliant. He set this kinsman redeemer or the guardian redeemer. You have first choice at it. But wait, before we talk about this, 10 guys to come watch this whole thing. And so they came around, and when the guy said, oh, heck, Boaz goes, okay, I'll take it. So now you announce, I don't. He took off his sandal. Boaz says, I do want it. I received this. Here are 10. It's a done deal. Done. That right to come because they have witnesses. He has made this pass on this by removing his sandal. Everything is free and clear. Boaz, this is what I want to do. It says, then the and Leah, who together family of Israel, may you have standing in Abraham. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom to Judah. And if you're not familiar with the story of Judah and Tamar, it's a twisted tale. Tamar was the of one of Judah's sons. Passed down to his next son. He died. No kids. Next son, right? Marrying her. She dresses up as a prostitute. She goes in disguise. She goes eyes with Judah, original father-in-law. Perez is one of their children. Perez is one of the children of Judah, whom he bore with his daughter-in-law. Son and second son had died. Under this of she was acting as a prostitute, and he went there and slept with her. Twisted tale. The Bible cannot be made up because you wouldn't make a story. That's not one you throw in there. But that's one of the true stories. And Judah gave her his signet, his seal, and left. And then she came back and said, I'm going to. And he says, well, then you should be blessed because you are the widow of my son. And she said, oh, who's the father of these children, this. And he went, uh-oh. Good. And so he has to take responsibility for them. Tail. Perez is that son. We are now way down the line, Perez. But Perez, you and who is better than to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. The one living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him, okay, which is like praise or blessed. And so the ladies of the town came and gathered around Naomi, took this child and said, man, this is great. My grandson here is really the one who's inheriting all this stuff. Named him Obed. It goes on. Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. So Ruth is the great-grandmother or whatever to King David. We have this lineage that comes through there. Again, why is this important? Because it's through Perez, who was this child of Judah, that we track down the lineage all the way to Boaz. And we track the lineage down to David. We go from David and we track the lineage down to Christ. Jesus was from the line of David, from the line of Boaz, from the line of Perez, from the line of Judah, who the Messiah would come from. He was born in Bethlehem of David and Boaz and Perez. All of a sudden back into this is this verifies the identity of not only David, but also of Christ, being of the line of Judah, being the one who is the Messiah, who was Bethlehem from a virgin, and who will rule forever. This story sets that up. Of ladies mentioned in the lineage of Jesus, the one being Rahab, the harlot, because Boaz is a descendant of Rahab as well. So you have Ruth and Rahab in the lineage of Jesus, even though neither one is women. Kind of cool, huh? The other thing that's neat about this is a picture of Christ. Jesse, the father of David. Four chapters. Bible warriors now. We do 4 chapters like nothing. So, all right. Questions guardian or Judah, Jacob. I don't know. I don't know if everybody was asleep. They might have been. But, again, it was one of those things of they weren't really doing anything even looked at and went, ooh, blush. It'd be kind of like down on one knee and says, will you marry me? That's basically what it was, is a proposal. Would have been there at the threshing floor and seen it, would have seen it as a proposal. Might have went, oh, he ain't going to accept her, which people do at restaurants. Down on one knee and they look at her and look at him and go, oh, she ain't going to take him. but then oh, isn't that so nice? I'd have never guessed that. He's way out of his league. But that's what would have been people that would have seen it. But they also didn't want to announce anything yet. And that's why he said before anybody could really be recognized, back to Naomi, until he talked to the other Redeemer, he couldn't accept fully that proposal. He had in his mind that he would, and he could have without redeeming the land. Would have been released and he could have, I guess, technically married her, but that and it would have with Ruth. And so he's like, we can't announce this until I go and talk to the rightful person who really is the kinsman redeemer and who may want the land. But once he refuses it, then yep, we're good. So it was kind of a protection of her and her dignity, that she wouldn't be embarrassed or wouldn't be thought of poorly. I'm sure she was nervous. But she also wasn't going to wait around him for him to propose. She's like, this dude ain't going to do it. Not that we know of. Not that we know of. So, Joe. Yeah, being in that lineage of King David, like I said, great-grandma to King David, so yeah, pretty close. She played a very pivotal role in everything that happened around Bethlehem and stuff.
Yeah, I realized what a good person she was.
Yeah.
Sticking with her and doing the work and everything.
And that's why they throw that, Perez all of a sudden in there, and most 90%, 99% of the people probably don't know who Perez is off the top of their head. But it's, that son of Judah. And so even in the writing of the book, they tie that back to know this is the lineage of Judah, and this goes right to David, and then ultimately that goes to Christ. So, yeah.
It's really amazing how it's all tying in.
Yep. It's just a big family story. All right. Any other questions? Jake?